Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Great. How you hanging in there, Eric?
I'm doing fine.
We
You know,
had
we've
a
had some,
weekend for a change, so it was great.
yeah, we've had some beautiful weekends, beautiful days. Get to hang out on the deck a little bit, get out, get out of the house.
Good stuff.
And today, as we start moving towards reopening the country, we're going to talk about adapting to the new normal and how you can adapt your business, adapt your personal behavior so that as an individual, you're prepared for what comes forward. And as a business person, you've got some ideas of how you can switch things up to both be ready for what's coming for reopening and adapt having an adaptive business model so that no matter what comes after, you've got a good way to pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're going through now, it's apropos they call it the new normal because things will never be the same as they were before this happened. And I think in a lot of ways, things are going to be better because what this is, it's an opportunity for really the whole world, mankind is one, to adapt to a problem and to come out looking better afterwards because we're all working together to make that happen. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in that, a lot of things that we could do that we're not going to be able to do anymore. And some things that we could do, they're going to take a long time to come back, such as concerts and sporting events and so on and so forth, due to this physical distancing thing. But it's very interesting times we're going through that we'll be telling our kids and grandchildren about for a long, long time to come.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, we're not making any predictions about what the new normal is going to look like. We have the same information that everybody else has. We're just talking about adapting. And it's the most difficult part of all of this is that nobody has answers yet. We don't know what's coming. So in order to be prepared for it, you kind of have to be ready for anything. So that's actually what we're talking about. And I've been working with clients on what we call the adaptive business model. And if you can visualize this, it's actually something that's very simple. Just imagine a 2x2 grid. On the first column, you have the label product. On the second column, you have service. On the first row, you have online. On the second row, you have offline. How you adapt your business model is that you need to have a strategy for going forward in each of those quadrants. So every business going forward should have a product that they can sell online and offline. They should have a service they can sell online and offline. Now, what this looks like changes business to business. It has to be individualized. But that is the basic framework that people need to look at in their businesses now. Because as we saw, when things shut down, physical locations shut down, but online picked up. So if you have a service that you're only offering offline, you are in big trouble. But if you can adapt and have a product that you can sell online, a service you can offer online, you can, pick up, change your business up, and shift your focus from one to the other to help keep you in business. And one of the perfect examples is the restaurant chain Cozy, which switched their business model from a quick service restaurant selling sandwiches and salads to selling the groceries that they used for their restaurants. So you could order a box of groceries, swing by, and it was contactless pickup, and you could get the groceries you needed. So we need to be able to be flexible and be able to shift gears like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you and I are both in consulting services and so on and so forth. And a lot of it was person to person assessments and doing trainings in person and so on and so forth. And you're way ahead of the curve as far as that goes from where I am. But the thing that I discovered, 2.5 months ago is using Zoom. And not only is that going to be the way that I provide things, but it's the best way looking back for me to get introduced to people rather than have somebody saying, okay, you got to go meet Chip. And that stuff isn't going to happen that easily. And it didn't back then. But now, again, I'm working on putting together a little quick teaser promo that I can just shoot out to people and introduce myself that way. And everything is going to be happening online, using virtual networking. And so, I mean, that's huge. And obviously, businesses have been using it for a long time, especially when you have multiple locations and so on and so forth. That's what these things were built for. But the technology is nothing more than seeing somebody's face on a screen on demand and communicating. And that is just so cool. And that is the present and the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple video conferencing. And what's funny is that people have talked about making video phone calls. The first video phone was actually showcased at the New York World's Fair back in the 60s. And it took this long for it to really gain traction. People have been doing FaceTime calls, now Zoom, video conferencing via WebEx and software like that. But it took something like this for people to really embrace it. Now, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Even when we get back to, meeting in person and things are all reopened, the ease of using this makes it a very valuable tool moving forward. And think about it, how much time are you saving when you can meet somebody at your desktop rather than spending 15, 20 minutes traveling to a location, or in further areas 45 minutes to an hour to travel to a location. So you're taking back a lot of time during your day.
Yeah, and one of the intangibles about this whole thing, I started using it for networking meetings and so on, but using it personally, as I know I mentioned, a couple of times, my wife actually started family Zoom meetings, and we had another one yesterday. And the bottom line is, we're missing each other so much physically, and it's just so cool to see people's faces rather than talking to them or texting them and so on and so forth. So, on a personal standpoint, this is around to stay too. I mean, for FaceTiming, our granddaughter just turned 5 months old the other day, and we haven't been able to see her in 2+ months, but we get FaceTimed every day. And, the next best thing to being able to hug her is at least to be able to see her growing and screaming at her parents and eating food for the first time and that kind of thing. And, you can't sense that by a text message or an email.
Right. It brings back, we've talked about the elements of communications in the past where, you know, in person, you have the most visual and audio cues as to what somebody is saying. You can see their body language. You can hear the tone of their voice. You can see the look in their eyes. And of course, when you go to phone call, email, text, you lose those cues, so things can be miscommunicated. Video conferencing brings a lot of that back. So it's a great way to communicate. And also, if you're offering a service or a product that can be shipped, you may have been doing business in your local area because you wanted to see people face to face. But using video conferencing software, it opens up the opportunity that you can serve a much larger area.
Yeah, obviously the whole world is at your fingertips with this, and part of your strategies moving ahead. I mean, you talked about the grid as far as online and offline products and services, but you really have to take a look at your whole way of doing things as far as your strategic plan goes, which means your business development strategies, because your area, potential areas of doing business now just expanded, and you have to figure out the different ways to reach that. And it's really, really important to put everything together from a cash standpoint as far as budgeting income and expenses, because you never know, what the financial market's going to look like moving ahead. All these things have to come into place, but um, doing things visually and seeing, I mean, when we talk about communicating with people, people are looking at you personally and your mannerisms and so on and so forth, which, as you said, I mean, you can't sense that, in a phone call or any other means of doing that. So it's so important, the whole package as far as communications goes, but very, very, very important is getting back to the planning stages and taking a look at, what the new normal is going to be for your business and how to take advantage of it and how to make it work for you.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned two very important things, planning, and you mentioned the money aspect of all of this. And I had a conversation with some people probably about a month to 6 weeks ago. And we found out that one of the biggest obstacles that businesses faced when they started to shut down their physical locations during this is that the majority of them had no way to collect money except for in person. They weren't set up to take payments online. They weren't set up for contactless payment. And that really surprised me because it is actually very simple to set yourself up for this. Sign up for a PayPal account, a Venmo account, get a Square reader, which can be contactless. These things allow you not just to sell online, but if you're a retailer, you can take a payment from 6 feet away. You never have to reach out and take anything from your customer. So this, we're talking about physical distancing here. This makes it so much easier for you to provide that physical distance, which, let's face it, there are still people who are very nervous about reopening. And if you can make them feel more comfortable by providing that distance among around them and still giving them the products or services they need, they're going to keep coming back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you hit on a good point too, as far as people being nervous opening. There's also going to be a lot of people who are nervous about going out too. So when you're dealing with your customers and so on and so forth, I mean, you have to take all of that into consideration. Um, I've seen a lot of things going on with the restaurants. They're scheduled to open up with outside seating distance apart this week here in Connecticut. And there's some people that
And
can't wait to get out, and there's other people that are going to say, I'm not going to do this, and why is everybody else doing that? And the message there is you got to respect that we're all different. Nobody has the right answer for everything, and you got to respect everybody's situation. So, I mean, the restaurant people, obviously, they're going to be happy to see people there, but if other people are criticizing them for being open and so on and so forth, you got to respect their opinion and just understand that there's a lot of people that are like that, and yet life has to go on, and not everybody's going to say, okay, today life is going to go on like this, and everybody's going to be on board and agree with it, because it's never going to happen. It's human nature. We're all different.
e- exactly. Around the country, restaurants have already reopened in many states. And we've seen pictures of people lining up to go to restaurants, standing shoulder to shoulder at a bar, ignoring social distancing or physical distancing. The fact of the matter is, there are people that it is more important for them to make that physical connection, to be out with people, than it is to stay separate because they're worried about the virus. People react differently. Um, on our sister podcast, Carnivore Radio, we interviewed a psychologist, and he explained to us that physical contact is necessary. Humans thrive on that. They rely on it for their psychological well-being. So in a lot of people, that psychological need outweighs their fear. In other cases, people's concern about the virus outweighs the psychological need. You can't criticize either side. You just have to accept that this is what they need. And it may not be what you need or want to see, but there are legitimate reasons for this. And you have to accept that and just accept people for what they need.
Yeah, we talk about personal development all the time, and part of it is to accept people for who they are and honor that. You know, seek first to understand and then to be understood. And even if you don't agree, you have to put up with what's going on and just seek a win-win situation. And the bottom line is, some people, a lot of us, are just really sick and tired of being cooped up and just want to get out. And some people are just going out and doing it no matter what's going on. And that's something that you're going to have to put up with out there because people are people. They're just not going to do that. And so some people are going to stay away and some people are going to figure out other ways to do this. And, that's just the way human nature is. So, and obviously there's a lot of stuff that's boiled up over the last 2.5 months because, you know, this is the new normal and nobody knows what's going to be like a month, 2 months from now and so on and so forth. I mean, until we have a vaccine that's reliable that everybody has access to and we have treatment, and we have testing so that we can grab a hold of this, you know, things are really, really going to be kind of like up in the air. And then after going through this, we're still going to be thinking, you know, looking off in the future, saying, could this ever happen again, and so on and so forth. Because, again, we're all scarred by this. It's like, once you experience something in your life, you learn from every negative or whatever experience that you have, and you have to move ahead. And this is something that's with us now. We're going to find ways to harness this one, but you never know what things are going to be like looking ahead. So it's a learning experience for all of us. And the most important thing we have to do is just appreciate each other for what they are and respect them.
Exactly. And we've used the term a couple of times, but I have to say I absolutely hate the phrase the new normal. And the reason I hate this phrase so much is because it's used constantly. And not just in this crisis. And the thing is, the predictions that people make of what the new normal look like almost never come true. In the late 1970s, the new normal was that very few people were going to have cars because nobody was going to be able to afford the gasoline. In the late 90s, the new normal was retail was going to go out of business. There were going to be no physical stores anymore. Everybody was going to shop online. In 2009, the new normal was if you were over 50 and out of work, you were probably never going to work again, and unemployment was going to stay above 15-20% permanently. Now we're saying the new normal is, oh, people are going to be separated. People, this is going to happen. The fact of the matter is, the new normal is the same as the old normal. And that normal is you adapt to change. What makes people so nervous is that they don't know how things are going to turn out. But they say that as if they ever knew how things were going to turn out. You could walk out of your house and get hit by a bus. None of us has a crystal ball. And the more you take that to heart and understand that we adapt to different circumstances every day of our lives. That's what we're going to be doing. That's what's normal.
Yeah,
And we're going to keep doing that.
yeah, it's all about changing and adapting. It's very, very rare that something old is replaced with something new. That something old has to adapt, like the malls and like the bookstores and this and that. I mean, you have to figure out new ways to do things. And it's a combination of exactly what you're talking about, figuring out how to serve people in different ways that they buy things right now, online and offline. So, books, they're always going to be there. You still see Barnes and Noble out there and some other bookstores and so on and so forth and other ways of doing things. However, you can go on and do it a whole lot easier from the same places. And so we talked earlier about taking a look at your business and adapting your strategies to handle what's looking ahead. And the people that have had trouble in the past are the people that didn't look ahead and therefore were not ready to adapt when a new way of doing things became more prominent than the old way of doing things. And that's where people have gotten into trouble in the past. If you look at over the last, you look at the predictions that you just talked about. So with gasoline
Right. And
a gallon, that's pretty low.
yes, it is. I know I just wrote not too long ago a blog post about a conversation that a Harvard MBA student had with Jeff Bezos. And this Harvard MBA, and people give a lot of, they attribute a lot of wisdom to MBAs, which quite frankly, you shouldn't. And Harvard, people give them a lot of credit and not necessarily true. Because this conversation, this Harvard MBA told Jeff Bezos that his best course of action would be to sell Amazon to Barnes and Noble and get out because Barnes and Noble was going to crush him. Well, obviously this is, I think, 15 to 20 years after that advice, and we see it certainly wasn't accurate. They predicted the ebooks. You weren't going to buy books anymore. Everything was going to be on your tablet. Well, books recently made a resurgence prior to this. People were going to bookstores and buying actual books. They talked about, streaming music you weren't going to get CDs. It was all going to be streaming. Well, as it turns out, what made a comeback wasn't so much CDs, but vinyl records started selling again. So just because there's something new doesn't mean that something old is going to go away. It's
Yeah.
about adapting.
Yeah, and that's what Amazon did. I mean, they started out all online, but I know there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of walking these days, yours truly included, which is fantastic. And you see a lot of mail trucks out there delivering stuff. Some you still see the UPS and whatever, but for each one of those, you see an Amazon Prime truck out there delivering things too. It's
Yep.
they adapted. They adapted, and you don't see a Borders truck or a Barnes and Noble truck and so on and so forth. They're using that kind of stuff going, but Amazon looked at all the different angles, and now they have the box stores too. The distribution centers and that kind of thing. So it's again, a lot of it is in planning and taking advantage of what the opportunities are, and they were obviously a benchmark for doing that.
Exactly. And there's a phrase in politics, but everybody should really take this to heart. And it's never waste a crisis. Now, in politics, it generally refers to the fact that in a crisis, you can get certain things done that you might not otherwise be able to. Now, whether it's good or bad depends on who's doing it. But from a business point of view and a personal point of view, the same thing holds. Never waste a crisis. A crisis forces you to adapt to new situations. And the better you can adapt and the more flexible you can become, the better off you'll be. And we've talked ad infinitum on episode after episode about why you need a positive mindset. Well, one of the things we've talked about is that with a positive mindset, you're not seeing problems, you're seeing opportunities. And every crisis has opportunities. You just have to be able to find them. And when you can adapt to what's being called the new normal, that's where your opportunities are. And these can be opportunities to build your business. These can be opportunities to help nonprofits. These can be opportunities to help your neighbors. It's not necessarily about profit. An opportunity is not necessarily about profit. But you can do all of these things as long as you adapt to new situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest opportunities, again, in part of your planning process is, I mean, you and I talk about networking and meetings and so on and so forth, which used to be all face to face. But if you look at the resources that you develop through networking and you look at your own business, it's never been a better time to put together a collaborative plan to take the strengths of your network and use them for all of your advantages as far as referring things to each other, getting things done, maybe bartering services and products off to each other when cash is a little bit tight and that kind of thing. And that's one of the huge opportunities is to just take a look at what you have. So don't ignore what you've developed over the years and look for new opportunities because people are very open to listening to that.
Absolutely. And it's not just about enhancing your own network, but you can grow your network. I'm actually doing more networking through Zoom than I used to do in person. Last week, over the course of 4 days, I had 6 networking events. And I can do that because I don't have to go anywhere. I just turn on the computer and there I am. So you can take the opportunity to meet new people, to connect with new people, to enhance the relationships with folks you already have. And, again, we've said this over and over again, episode after episode, but nobody succeeds on their own. It's about relationships, it's about knowing who can do what. How you can help them and how they can help you. And those connections are crucial. And even if you can't get together with them in the same room right now, you can hop on a video conference or, the phone still works. You can still make a phone call, but keep in touch with people and build those connections.
Absolutely.
Now, I think, we've only got a few minutes left. I want to hit one other thing, and we've touched on it a couple of times in this episode, and that's fear. The biggest obstacle that people have right now is fear. And the reason for most of this fear is one, uncertainty about what's going to happen, but two, we have been inundated by news media, social media, all about the worst of what's going on. So I want to bring up a couple of very important points. One, when you're looking at the news media, negativity sells. There's an old statement going back to newspaper days, if it bleeds, it leads. So they are focusing on the worst of it because that's what brings them ratings, that's what brings them circulation. So you have to remember that's only part of the story. The other thing that is absolutely crucial that most people don't realize is there are dozens, if not hundreds, of scientific studies being done. And ordinarily, I'm a big proponent of going right to the research to find things out. But right now, there is so much pressure to get these studies out that they're skipping a very important step. In the past, before a study was published and released, it was peer reviewed, which means people that had nothing to do with the study, scientists who had nothing to do with the study, read the report, looked at it, saw if they could poke holes in it, and judged whether or not the methodology of the study was accurate, the findings were viable. Now, there's such a rush to get these studies out. They're going out without being peer reviewed. And we've already seen a lot of studies that were done early on in the pandemic pulled back because turns out they weren't right. So you have to remember that all of the information out there, people are doing their best, but it's not the full story. It's just what we can figure out so far. So you shouldn't let it scare you. So, Chip, we're hitting the end of our time. What do you think is the big takeaway our listeners need from this episode?
Well, you just mentioned the word fear, false evidence appearing real. There is an opposite to everything. And the opposite of fear is mindfulness, which is just taking a look at that and saying, is this really real? Is there an opportunity? There opposites means there's a 180-degree difference to what you're looking at. And the bottom line is there is an opportunity in every obstacle. So basically, it's really, really important to use that positive mindset so that you can take a pause between your initial reaction, which often is fear, and really diagnose that and have a positive response to that, or just a response that's not sensationalistic, because a lot of times what fear is, again, it's false evidence appearing real. So how does this apply to now? It's taking a look for what the opportunities are in everything that we're doing in our lives and in our businesses, and taking a positive approach, and most importantly, realizing that other people are going through the same thing and they're responding from fear too, and just understand that and have a little bit of empathy for them too.
Well said. I think for me, the big takeaways are be prepared to adapt as the situation changes and don't make decisions out of fear. Take the time to look at the situation, look at it calmly and rationally, and adapt the best you can. And if we can all help each other and not criticize each other's decisions and not yell at each other because their decisions may not agree with your decisions, we'll all be a lot better off.
I approve that message.
You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts. You can also find us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. See you then.